Trust the Journey. I'm Melanie Curtis.
And I'm Jason Moledzki.
Our mission is to live, laugh, love, and learn together with you.
We're here to create conscious connections, to grow and contribute from our practice of openness, honesty, vulnerability, humility, and trust. Trusting the entire journey.
Absolutely. If you want to find us on the wider internet family, go to trustthejourney.today. That's our website, our Instagram. Please like, comment, share, subscribe, whatever feels inspired to you. If you would like to join us in the Trust the Journey family, where we expand the conversation and support each other, you are always welcome to do that. You only need to donate on Patreon. We would welcome that donation. So go to the website, trustthejourney.today, scroll down, donate on Patreon in any amount, and we will add you to that private Facebook group.
And huge thanks to all of our Trust the Journey family members who do support us through there. It really does help us bring this show to production so that we can continue doing it. So thank you very much. We really do love you and appreciate you. We also like to send some thanks out to our editor, Kimberly Joy Voice. She's been managing the podcast editing and posting for us. And if you would like any of her services, she's also available at kimberlyjoyvoice@gmail.com, and she will be glad to help you.
Absolutely. So right on, team, let's jump into this one. Today we're going to be talking about self-expression and whatever form that might take for each of us. And we are right now first going to dive into talking with Jay about Queen Jazmine. Very interested to learn about her.
For sure. Me too.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So can you first tell us, Jay, who is Queen Jazmine? So if people don't know, give us some background as to what we're going to be talking about with her.
Sure. Queen Jazmine is my alter ego. She's a drag queen, DJ, stage performer, all around fun-loving fashion freak who just loves to have a great time.
I love that. And that's sort of how the insight, or not the insight, but the impetus to talk about this was, I was like, we were texting going, ha ha ha, what should we talk about? I was like, and Jay was sending me these amazing pictures of some of his beautiful outfits. And I was like, let's talk about fashion, because I love fashion. Oh, yeah. I was kind of joking, but the truth is it's such an amazing form of self-expression. And Queen Jazmine takes it seemingly, at least from my perspective, viewing and witnessing her, it's a bold expression. And so I'm like curious why that is. Like what's that? What's the root of that? Or tell us more about that.
Well, I think you're definitely accurate. Her style is loud and obnoxious and stage worthy. You know, like really, really present and colorful and flamboyant and just, to the point of ridiculous. And I think that's largely a reflection of my own personality, having been trapped in the modern male persona of like what men's clothing and men's fashion should look like, according to kind of the stigma that I was raised in and had felt myself trapped within for so long. So it really found an opportunity for me to break away from that. I was in a big department store yesterday, and I was walking through the men's clothing section with just a sheer disappointment on my face, just like so pathetic with the choices that I get based on this social stereotyping of what I'm supposed to wear. And knowing that I'm going to walk right past all this stuff and go to the other section where there's colorful, fun, interesting, playful things that I can choose from, now that I'm comfortable enough to break out of that his and hers. This is what's allowed or not allowed.
Yeah, that's powerful. I mean, tell us more about that. This idea of now that you're comfortable implies a discomfort, which completely makes sense when we're talking about societally prescribed roles, and just not even societally prescribed, but majority prescribed. You know what I mean? Where we want to fit in, or we're afraid of being different, or afraid of really acknowledging where or what the expression of us actually is. So I'm curious about that part of your I don't know I don't even know how to ask the question of like finding her or acknowledging her. Like, can you tell us more about that discovery process?
Yeah, absolutely. It goes much further back, like I guess it continues to go back through every generation within our lineages of our families, that however our parents are taught and whatever belief structure they have is the one that's imposed upon us when we're children. So my early experiences were very much based in the Catholic, Protestant, Pentecostal, Christian upbringing, which very much put clear, definitive boundaries around what is okay and what's not. And it actually demonized and villainized things that are outside of that spectrum. So, the typical North American upbringing of men do this and women do this. Women wear makeup when men do not. Women cook and clean. Men go to work. The old stereotype that is just so outdated now, it just doesn't apply anymore. It was drilled into me at a young age that if I fell outside of these lines, specifically regards to sexuality, if I were to say that I'm queer or homosexual, I'm literally a sinner and I'm going to hell.
Mm-hmm.
And so the idea that if I don't fit this box immediately the way that it's described, that I'm going to eternal damnation was expressed to me at an impressionable age of, say, 6 or 7 years old.
Yeah.
Which is a pretty terrifying concept for me as an adult, to try to tell a child that you actually think you have enough knowledge about what happens beyond this world to, express that onto an impressionable enough being to scare them into submission for your own set of ideals. It's just ridiculous. So that's the root of it, right?
Yeah.
Like I was born into this society, into this culture that says, if you like anything that's outside of these descriptors, you're a bad person, essentially.
Yeah.
And so the reason why this has been something that I've kept to myself for so long is because it's taken me a long time to undo that trauma. Mm-hmm. That trauma was burned in really, really young at a really early age. And it's hard to, even if you like logistically come to terms with it and you're like, yeah, I understand that this is just something I learned in church and I'm not part of that church anymore or that cult anymore, then I don't have to believe those things, but they're still burned into my fear and judgment like impressions.
Yeah. That makes complete sense. Gosh, I can't imagine there aren't a lot of people listening that can resonate in some way with that. You know what I mean? Not necessarily maybe in the realm of religion or whatever, but the impressionable influences that we have at a young age and how that might direct us. It's interesting because even if we take it outside of like a trauma, I was thinking, okay, I actually have spent a lot of my life inside of a more masculine energy, where I'm leading teams, where I'm, doing sports. And that's a gendered thing too, which I think is awesome. That's being sort of undone as well. This whole women in sports and having that not be a gendered thing. But when I was young, it was, you know what I mean? It was like kind of different and more masculine to be an athlete or whatever. And it took me a while to feel more comfortable with my feminine side because those more masculine things that I did, that I participated in, they were a little bit of a rebellion in a way, but that they also limited me in my exposure to being more feminine. And so like, that's partly why I do my big photo shoots with the big fat, wild outfits and stuff like that. I love fashion as a vehicle for self-expression and art. And so I know I've mentioned this on the podcast before, so it's not necessarily the same thing, but I feel like I'm sitting here totally resonating, even though I'm a woman, a heterosexual woman, and I'm like, I still had a heavily masculine experience as a young girl and then had to really open myself up to the more feminine parts of myself and my expression as well. So I love that.
Yeah, I completely relate. Just the general concept that like boys wear these colors and girls wear these colors it's a ridiculous concept in its core structure, right? You know, boys are blue, girls are pink. You're like, well, so that basically what that says is, as a boy, I'm not allowed to like pink. You know,
or if you do something, there's some impact.
Or the worst part is if you do, there's something wrong with you.
Yeah. Oh,
and then you grow up with this impression that there's something wrong with you because you like a color or a fabric or something sparkles and you like it.
Yeah.
So this whole concept is really, really messed up.
Well, tell me more about this part of it, because you were pointing to this earlier about the fear of that, the trauma of thinking you can't like something and having to hold back an authentic piece of you, which then speaks to when you finally do decide and get to the point where I am ready and willing to be brave and express this part of myself. Like, how did you get through that to the point where you actually brought Queen Jasmine into the world?
So I've been a queer person my entire life. I guess that's the only word I can find that really like makes any sense. So I've been doing the whole pronoun study for a number of years now, and like trying to learn what these pronouns mean and how they actually work, and trying to find one that actually can describe how I view myself or how I feel about myself without that being with you know, trying it on. I'm like, am I transgendered, or am I gender fluid, or am I queer or whatever? And I'm like, well, queer is a great word because it's just weird. It's just weird. Just it's so there's normal and there's queer. Okay, you know? Cool. So I'm like, okay, queer is good because it's an unusual. You know. So I'm happy to be the odd apple in the basket and not have to try to put further definition around that. And what's driven me to that is I've always liked women's clothing. You know, my entire life, since I was a boy, pre-puberty, you know, before puberty, I was always like, why are these ones lacy? Why are these ones more delicate? Why are these ones more interesting when mine are so simple or boring? Or why are the colors more fun? Yeah. And then growing up with a lot of time with girls as well, they're like dollhouses and Barbies and all this stuff. And you're like, why are these toys for them and why are these toys for me? I get tools. And I get bicycles, and girls get dolls and cook sets and all this stuff. So I've always thought of myself as a very curious person. You know, I want to know. Whatever it is, I want to know. I'm not happy if I don't know. I want to dig into it. And so even at the age of like 7 or 8 years old, I'm like, I don't understand why these things are separated into different piles. It doesn't make any sense why the girls have some sets of things and the guys have some sets of things. Why don't we all just have the things and we choose the ones we like? Yeah. And that foundation was already there for a long time. And I started experimenting as any children do and as any young adults do. And I'm trying different things. And I'm like, well, I kind of like this or I don't like that. And I got to a point where that curiosity, that true, like youthful, innocent curiosity ran into the judgment of the world, you know? And I got old enough to be able to see my own curiosity in a relationship compared to the way the people around you view the things that you're curious about. Yep. And that put up a wall immediately. And I was like, oh, this is going to get me in trouble. This is going to get me judged by the society that I'm currently structured within in a negative way, where I'm going to now have to deal with these outcomes of my own curiosity as viewed in a negative way, which is an absolutely horrible construct. If curiosity is the absolute foundation to change and growth and all the important things, right? Totally. Curiosity is right at the very top, next to love and gratitude. And you point to how, and you point to how judgment closes off that. So like curiosity by definition is without judgment. And so when you meet it with judgment, it shuts it down. Totally. It's like, oh, yeah. Yeah. So somewhere in my teens, as you know, before puberty, I had no concept of the judgment, right? Except for the church's
Yeah.
damnation piece of it. Seriously,
Except
that's
for,
the word.
internal damnation,
Eternal damnation. Thanks, Mom.
Oh my God. Louis C.K. does this bit about how he tells his daughter that the world is going to explode one day and she like loses her fucking shit. Totally terrified. It's like this hilarious bit. But anyway.
I love my mom. She was the best mom I could ever hope for. But fucking hey, man, what the hell were you thinking? You scared the life out of me, like told me I was going to burn in eternal damnation. What the fuck? Yeah,
totally.
Come on.
That's what Louis C.K.'s bit is about, is the joking about parents being like, oh fuck, like one would think anyway, go on.
Yeah. So after I started to get old enough that sexuality started to occur, right? Like there's a difference between curiosity and just being an innocent child, and then having sexuality appear in our lives when we're hit puberty around 11, 12, 13 years old. Those things change, and all of a sudden there's this other part of us that emerges. And when that happened, I was like, oh, I'm definitely different. I'm not falling straight into one of these categories. And I don't know where that difference lands. There's no like clear category.
Yeah.
But I knew that didn't fit in society's preconceptions in a way that I would be able to move through the world that I was in without being judged in a very forceful, aggressive, potentially violent way. And the reason I say violent is because I was beat up. Like as a young boy, older boys who were homophobic accused me of being gay and beat the shit out of me.
Oh my God.
Multiple times. I can remember these incidences as being like a 10-year-old and having a boy that's 16 or 17 punching me in the face, calling me gay until I'm bleeding and traumatized. And so
horrible.
The root of these fears lies in early traumatic experiences, as well as the relationship to the society that I was born into. And albeit it was the 70s and 80s. So it was a long time ago relative to now. The world's a very different place, but these judgments are still quite powerful and still very active. And depending on what part of the world you're listening from, you're going to have an entirely different perspective as to some places are going to be very liberal and other places are going to be very conservative towards the amount of judgment. And even when I grew up in Toronto, I would consider to be a very liberal place. But the subset of culture that I grew up in was not. It was very conservative. And the subculture of where I was at in the city, particularly like the area of the city, there was no rainbow flags, put it that way.
Yeah.
You could go downtown to the gay district and you could find that, but not where I was growing up.
Yeah. And I can't imagine you don't feel that. Like, even if you're not consciously aware of it, I can't imagine you're not unconsciously aware of that sort of danger. And I say danger, and that's a very broad, sweeping version, but it could be literal physical danger, but it's emotional danger too. This judgment, this being rejected, this being beaten up when you are inside of or where you're in an area or in a collective that clearly is not supportive of what you perceive and feel and know yourself to be.
Yeah. So I'll just kind of wrap up that period to say that somewhere in my teens, I had a number of traumas in my early life. If you've listened to the show at all, I lost both my parents quite young. I had a serious trauma with one of my best friends attempting suicide. And then I had some traumas surrounding having a child and becoming a parent and then becoming not a parent at a very young age. And so this stacking of emotional traumas left me very emotionally vulnerable and very emotionally sensitive, where I was terrified, absolutely terrified of any other anything else happening to me that could scar me in an emotional way.
Totally.
And knowing that I was an unusual person, a queer person, that was like, okay, if I have to deal with this on top of the other things that I've had to deal with so far, I'm probably going to kill myself. Mm-hmm. Like, I just won't be able to handle anything else beyond what I'm already dealing with. Yeah. And so I made a conscious decision in my early 20s to just put that whole part of me into a box, like a literal conscious decision to say, okay, I'm choosing to not present this part of myself to the world in any way, because I don't have the energy to deal with the judgment. I don't have the emotional stability to be able to express my point of view or even to like understand where it comes from. Just not ready. So I literally took any version I have of myself that was queer or that liked women's clothes or liked to express myself in any way that was feminine, whether that's jewelry or fashion or haircut or like whatever it was. And I either made it hyper masculine and made it really tough and strong and, you know, comfortable for this society to accept, mm-hmm. or I locked it away in a literal box or closet where you couldn't see it, you couldn't share in it, and it was just for me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. That makes me think of all the stories that you hear from the LGBTQ plus community of coming out and how there are so many suicides of young people, and that Jay, I love that you are sharing this, because God, I hear this and I go, my hope is that there's people listening going, okay, I'm not alone. It's not just me. Wow, Jay Moledzki is someone I really admire and look up to and love and whatever, is sharing so openly. Cool. Maybe I can too. And I'm not suggesting that that's an easy decision to make. I am no expert in any way on this, in this conversation. It's more like as an ally, as someone who has been listening and learning and caring to be of service to equality and gender conversations that are opening up this dialogue. The things that move me the most are those stories where young people are like, I didn't kill myself because I heard someone else's story. It makes a fucking difference. And it's so sad to me that there's anyone in the world that doesn't feel safe to be seen and heard as their true self, even though, of course, that's a very, very widespread problem.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'd say that's an everyday occurrence, that you're going to be in the presence of somebody who's being smaller and dulling their light than who they really are because of their societal preconceptions that have been imposed upon them, you know. Then it's such a hard thing to heal, you know, because without literally transplanting ourselves to a different part of the world where society's different, it's very difficult to outgrow your surroundings.
Yeah, there's a quote that I love, and I don't know where it's from. I don't know who said it. I think it was like on a Daily Zen email one day 10 years ago, but it was something like, you will be like those with whom you surround yourself. Your environment is stronger than you are. Not to be dissuading people away from their power, but more to acknowledge that the people we choose to spend our time with and the environments we choose to live in and amongst has power to influence us. And we need to recognize that. So if we do need to make a change or make a choice to leave a place or to spend less time with this person, more time with this person, or move or whatever, it's worth considering for these very real reasons.
I want to talk about the suicidal element for a minute, because we were there and I don't want to wander too far away from it before taking a second to reflect on at least some of my own personal relative experience with this set of feelings and emotions, because I have heard So I've had close people in my lives commit suicide. I've had people attempt suicide, and I've never made it's hard to say this without, the typical attempted suicide is, overdosing or hanging himself or shooting oneself or like some form of like, okay, this is a clear suicide attempt, right? And there was a point when I was young when I did something that was definitely a suicide attempt, but it was in a different structure, and it just happened that I didn't die. I was so furious and so angry and so didn't know how to manage all the emotions. I got on a motorcycle and I held the throttle at wide open through 25 city lights.
Wow.
Red, yellow, green, whatever.
Wow.
I didn't pay any attention to what was ahead of me. I just rolled the dice at full throttle. And it was completely reckless because I had somebody else on the bike with me.
Wow.
And I had no regard for the other people's lives that I was potentially affecting by that action. It was absolutely careless, reckless. If that's attempted manslaughter, it just not being considered of any regard to anybody. And I've never really looked at that in a way where I have at this age. Now I can look back at it and be like, wow, I was just out of control, completely reckless. And I've never understood or been able to really take and create a relationship between you hear these ads for like suicide prevention hotlines, and they say, if you're having suicidal thoughts, you could call this hotline. And I'm like, what does that mean? What's a suicidal thought? And then a few years ago, not that many years ago, I heard my own thoughts say, well, if I don't deal with this, I could always kill myself.
Wow.
And then it was like, after I was kind of reviewing my own thoughts, I was like, whoa, that was one of the possible items on the list of like how to manage the challenged situation that I'm in. Was like one of the listed items in my potential ways of dealing with this was suicide. And then I'm like, whoa, that's suicidal ideation.
Yep.
That's exactly what they're talking about in those ads, or when you hear about suicide prevention, is when it becomes something that is a potential way of dealing with the challenges. Now we're considering it as an option.
Yeah.
And it was amazing how like sneaky it like slid into the list of potential ways of, getting therapy or talking to my family or friends, or like, I'm just going to drink myself to death or what. And like, wait a second, that's on the list too. That's a form of suicide, like to death, like that concept of in there. So this is literally started coming up for me a number of years ago in like the subconscious layers of my mind without being really aware of it. I started realizing I was drinking myself to oblivion, or I was drugging myself so that I wouldn't feel the emotional pain that I was feeling anymore, of having taken that part of myself and pushed it into a locked box that I wasn't even allowed to access anymore.
Yeah.
So the whole reason, like what's brought Queen Jasmine to the stage has been, if I didn't do this, I was going to die.
Yeah.
Because I was making actions and having thoughts that were leading to a list of potentials that a variety of them include potential death. Because that part was being so suppressed and so fearfully contained. It was just I had to do something about it.
Oh, so powerful. Oh, I mean, gosh, whether we're talking about this version of an expression or any version of a pain point, God, thank you so much for sharing that, Jay. It is so resonant. I can't imagine, again, anybody listening, no matter how they identify or what their life experience is, liberal, conservative, queer, straight, whatever the label you might use. I feel like we all have those things that we have so much shame around that we can't that we can't show it, that we can't look at it. It's too painful. We can't even acknowledge it. It just like keep it buried. So whether that's stuff we're aware of or stuff we're unaware of, you know, because I feel like sometimes it's still in the background of our waking consciousness, those old hurts and old pains. But anyway, I love that you point to that oh God. And again, we are not professionals in this realm. So again, please know that none of this is actual advice, but it's more, I love that we're talking about this because I talk a lot about the need to grow and heal. And so like, well, why? You know, and I feel like what you just shared is a great example of if we let something metastasize or grow or poison us to the level that you're talking about, there are truly dire consequences.
Yeah, absolutely. The subconscious knows what's up, right? Like our conscious mind doesn't always have the ability to register and understand exactly what's the causation of our feelings are. And, you know, you said you were touching on the idea that some things are so sensitive that we can't even talk about it. Like there's not and I can remember a number of years ago when I was so torn up about like, I just couldn't get a word out at all about it, you know, and there was just no way that I was going to have a conversation or with my most trusted and loved person. It was like, it's just not possible.
Yeah.
And it's been getting to the edge of myself and seeing like how scared I was of an outcome, you know, of finality, a fatal outcome. I'm like, well, this could potentially lead to killing me, you know, because I'm so crushing it down so hard that I have to deal with it. And it was the most terrifying thing I've ever had to do is like, okay, now I'm going to have to deal with the thing that scares me the most, you know, and all the fear that I've built up around it is inside of my own head, right? Like that fear isn't something I can pick up off the table. It's not sitting here next to me, you know? It's a concept that I've created and I've built it all up around myself inside of my own mind. And all the guilt, all the shame, all the fear, all those things are constructs. And it's been a matter of one by one pulling the bricks out of those walls that I've put up that I'm living within myself. And I have to reflect back to Pink Floyd. You know, anybody from our generation knows Pink Floyd and The Wall and that incredible audio-visual story that was told by Roger Waters, and how that's been a hugely impactful piece in millions of people's lives, and how beautiful that story is and how artfully it's been told. And we can all relate to it in some way, you know, because it's so simple in its concept of like, oh, we've been hurt and we don't want to get hurt again. And so we put up barriers around ourselves to protect that part of ourselves. And in that, we shrivel and die because we're locked away from everything that we care about. And we have to somehow take it apart again and find our way outside of that cage that we've built for ourselves. And I really relate to that. One by one, like poking a brick out of the wall, you know, and then taking a few out, but you can't knock the whole thing down at once, you know, like it just doesn't work. It's like a long, slow process. So it's been a number of years that I've been undoing this whole emotional barrier between myself and myself.
Yeah. Well,
right?
And again, I think you point to something also really resonant for most people, I would guess, is this idea of I recognize in my consciousness now that this thing that I am avoiding, that I cannot talk about, that I am terrified of, is my lane to healing, freedom, love, acceptance, all of the things that we actually seek and crave in our human experience. And so I'm very curious how you got to and what that first conversation was like. How did you actually get to the point where you spoke?
Well, it's definitely a combination of therapies, finding safe spaces, trusted people that are there to hold space for those growth experiences to occur.
Yeah.
And I can say that there's definitely been a number of those that have been based in traditional therapy, of having worked with, I think I've worked with like 5 different therapists now to find one who I resonate with.
Amazing.
That I really have a great rapport with and really will continue to work with, because it seems like we have a match, an energetic match that works. And that took a number of years to get to that point. And the other one, and that went from like, it started off with addiction counseling, and it moved into the like LGBTQ plus queer, personal therapy and cognitive behavior therapy, and moving through these different modalities. And then the other side of it is, of course, we're huge advocates. It's the plant medicines have been a massively powerful tool within my own journey to create a space where I felt held by the universe. I felt held by my experience called life, in that I could look at who I am as a whole spiritual being and not judge myself, but actually love myself, and then bring that practice from the psychedelic space into my everyday life as a practice of integration.
Emotional safety.
Absolutely.
Emotional safety. I want to just scream it from the rooftops. I want it to be something that people get into their everyday consciousness, that they are caring about it as a pillar, foundational key to their relationships, to their lives, to everything. Like, what needs to happen? Who is, like, where is emotional safety in my life? Where does it exist currently? Where could I go and say out loud the things I'm scared to say? Who are those people? And maybe you have people in your life that are like that. Maybe you don't. If you don't, a therapist is a great place to start to try and find that. And I love that you pointed to how much of a process it can be to find the right fit for a therapist. That, you know, I've heard so many times from friends and clients and stuff that they tried a therapist, but I don't know, it didn't work. And then they give up after maybe just trying one person, and it can take time. And I want to highlight this, because if that is where you will find emotional safety, such that you can explore at these very terrifying depths of yourself and your expression, it's worth that effort. And sometimes anyway, it's friends, and it really depends, but yeah.
So I'll touch on the friends part too, because I would love to give you some gratitude and some love for being part of the circle of friends that I selected a number of years back to confide in a form of trust. So that emotional safety, I picked 4 or 5 people who are really close to me that I know that they're people that I'm 100% safe with, that they're the people that I could, no matter what I have to say, they're just going to be there and be a good listener and allow me the space to go through my own journey without imposing their own opinion or judgment on that. And they're just going to hold space for me in a loving way. And so massive thanks for Melanie, because she is one of those people in my group.
I love you.
Julie, Tucci, Brett, Brad, Jamie. That was my core group. Those were the people that were like, no matter how scared I am of what I'm going through, I could pick up the phone and say, I'm kind of freaking out right now, or I'm doing great right now, or this is really hard right now, or I don't know what to say. Maybe you'll just talk to me for a while, like setting up a core group of people, and maybe it's just one person, but finding that emotional safety through a friends group was a massive part of that kind of trifecta of like having a trained professional, having a trained professional through medicine, and then having a core group of friends that I could lean on no matter what.
Yeah. Oh, thank you for trusting me. I love you. I am wildly honored to be in that circle, and always am. Yes, I'm here. I love it. I fucking am into it. I'm into it because, man,
making it weird, making it so weird,
man, making it weird because, man, I mean, think about that. That's like such a freaking gift to be able to hold space and this is partly why like the life coaching thing in my life is so wildly inspiring to me still, is it's a version of that where you are holding this wildly loving, non-judgmental space for people to be seen and heard and loved. And that's it. And what comes of that, what goals we set, what accountability comes from it, like, you know, because I mean, not to take something super deep and really meaningful for you and take it to a level of accountability, but at some point there were actions that built on that. So that first action of I'm gonna speak to these trusted people, I'm going to pick up the phone and dial it. And then there's like, okay, I'm getting to the point where I'm going to start expressing this in new ways. I mean, can you tell us how it evolved from there? So you have these experiences with your trusted people, with your trusted professionals of being safely held and seen and heard. What then came of it? Like, because it's not that Queen Jasmine needed to necessarily be in the world, but that's what happened. That's what the honest expression was, correct? As opposed to like, because if it was more like, oh, I just need to be allowed to have these thoughts, maybe that's what the outcome would be. So we don't even know when we start to open the box that's in the metaphorical closet. I'm just sort of spitballing here. I'm guessing that we don't even really know where it's going to end up. We might have these ideas of, oh my God, I'm going to have to be this wild drag queen that goes and does shows, and who knows? You didn't know. That's really, we don't know that necessarily, unless you did. So anyway, I'm rambling, but you know where I'm going with this.
I love you, Mel. So, I've known for a long time that Halloween is, and this is a very typical kind of coming out space, where Halloween is the one night of the year where you can put on anything. And it's very normal for anybody to wear anything. And it's the one, if you're going to look at your general population of straight guys, it'd be the most likely time that you're going to see a straight guy in a dress, right? It's going to be on Halloween night.
True. Yep.
Yeah, 100%. And so I've known that for my whole life. And, you know, for 20 years, I've been considering when I'm going to do a cross-dressing or drag out performance of some kind, like, you know, go out in public in cross-dress. And I'd considered it lots of time, and I've always had admiration for people who did, but I just never had the guts. I never felt comfortable because there was such an underlying emotional attachment, because it wasn't just throwing on a costume and going out for the night, because it was like, no, there's a big part of myself that's actually being represented here. And so if I'm going to do this, it has to have a level of authenticity to it that actually feels like an accurate representation. And I'm an artist. I need to be able to express myself in an artful way. And I had an opportunity. I was invited to come perform as a DJ on Halloween night at a party out here in the desert. And I know this space to be emotionally safe. I know that those venues that we create, those experiences, have a very thoughtfully and very purposefully and created safeness to them. That when we put those events together, we consider all participants, and that's part of what we're doing is creating a container for self-expression, for freedom, for people to be themselves, to express themselves in any way they want, be any version of yourself you want to be, as long as it's not causing anybody else any emotional harm or physical harm, then you're welcomed in this space. And so I knew I could go into that space with any form of myself I wanted. And I'd been collecting some parts, some pieces and outfit stuff for some time. And I had an idea for this rainbow bright type character with this big rainbow wig and rainbow tutus and corset and rainbow striped everything. And I'm like, I'm going to take this, full on rainbow drag queen out for Halloween and put her on stage, because the stage is also a very safe place and not in its entirety. But if you go through all of history and you say, well, where are men welcomed in a dress?
Yeah.
It's on the stage.
Yeah.
On the stage, it's way more normal. Put some air quotes around that.
Right.
It's way more normal for a guy to have on a wig and a dress on stage than it is, say, at a restaurant.
Yeah. At a CVS, picking up, gum or something. Yeah.
Yeah. It's way like if you just, it's odd. Like we view it as odd if a guy is wearing women's clothing, but we don't view it as odd if a woman's wearing guys' clothing. Huh. Anyway.
God.
Back to the point.
Yeah.
I thought Halloween was a great place to be able to express this. I knew I had a safe container. I knew I would be supported there. And what happened was when I did get on stage for this performance, I wasn't really thinking about that being a recurring venue for expression. But what I found was that she was quite at home there.
Cool.
That was a space where she could be herself, be loud, gorgeous, flamboyant, and expressive, and all these things that are applauded and warmly welcomed by an audience. And I realized, I'm like, oh, there's always been a safe place for this expression. And that is up here where it's loud and proud and beautiful.
Yep.
And I have coming out the other side of the experience, I was like, wow, that felt great. That was absolutely over the moon from what I expected to be, which was I was toughen up. I was like, okay, got my boots on, got my makeup did, got my nails done. I'm ready to go and like strut up on stage, but I was terrified, at the same time.
Of course.
But the reception was so positive and so appreciative and so enthusiastic that I immediately knew, I'm like, oh, this is home for this type of expression. And I mean, if I look at my own upbringing and I say, who are the influential women in the theatrical world, I'm thinking Madonna, Cyndi Lauper, Lady Gaga, like the fashion performer, stage presence, this whole thing of like incredible, authentic, loud, colorful, statement driven women. And I'm like, that's beautiful. That's amazing. That's an expression that I completely appreciate. And I get to go and embody my own version of that. And for me, it's been a beautiful balance because I've had 15 or 20 years of doing the hyper masculine and being a alpha male top competitor, really putting on the other side of that coin where I'm a top performer in this like really powerful masculine persona and that had a lot of fashion to it too. Let's not pretend that it didn't.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, yeah, well, I mean that going back to the expression, but not to round out or to speak to what you just shared. obviously the emotional safety, another key component to it being a positive, not re-traumatizing experience, right? Yep. So, because like it could have been a re-traumatizing experience. And so I don't want to just be like, oh, the world's so wonderful and it's so easy to do this. Just do what Jay did. The emotional safety component was very important in that story, that you're like, this is, even though you still were terrified, understandably, this being sort of your first, public expression of this part of you. What I love also about Queen Jasmine is she is a rebellion to these boxes. And for me, like I see it and I go, oh, that's a version of freedom. Fuck it. Who the fuck cares? If Jay wants to express and play with color and fashion and expression, who cares genuinely in the best possible, free, loving, supportive, accepting way? And I just want to say something that is resonates with me personally, is like, Mine is like slightly different, but I go back to these sort of art projects that I've been doing. The artist in me is this like, what am I wearing and where am I wearing it? How are these ideas coming together that are atypically or not supposed to be together? Or where am I exploring, again, this part of me that I haven't explored? And how can I do it in a big way? So I'm having an edge, like an experience at my edge. So that's why when I think about, oh, I'm going to have this big fashion shoot in New York, I'm going to make my own skirt, I'm going to build this artistic thing that I then wear. You know what I mean? That I really resonate with that just myself. And the last thing I want to say, and thank you for listening, is when you mentioned Lady Gaga and Madonna and people who use their fashion expression as art, that's basically, I've been thinking, that's literally on my like to-do list, where I like am thinking creatively about what is my next sort of art photo shoot going to be, and how am I going to elevate what I connect its mission and message around. So I don't have clarity around that yet, but it's something I'm working on, and it's something that enlivens me and excites me to be creative and free in that way.
Absolutely. Yeah. Same for me. The whole idea of like diving into any one of these creative expressions of like, what's the outfit going to be? What's the look? And what's the whole, for me, it's a musical expression. Like, what's the whole experience going to be like? And how's the audience going to perceive it all? And what's the viewer's perception going to be? That whole thing is just so much fun to explore, really, as an artist. That's the whole point of it.
It's such a contribution too, going back to obviously you sharing this incredible story of your own healing, of your own awakening, of your own bravery, of your own, God, just beautiful freedom. And I love that, Jay, as a contribution to other people who might be sitting in their chair, in their car, taking a walk, listening to this, going, I have those same thoughts, or I have those same fears, and maybe there's a door open for possibility for them. Like, that's another reason why I care why would I care? It's not just because I'm enlivened at being on the edge. It's that I personally believe if we're thinking something, if we're feeling something, there's a guarantee that there are other people in the world thinking and feeling it too. And so being brave enough to express ourselves in those ways is a contribution to those people that are also held back.
I can tell you from my own experience is this has been just over a year now that I've been, publicly sharing this part of myself. And in that time, I've had a dozen guys come to me. Amazing. And be like, I want to do that. I want to do drag. Oh. Like, can you help me with makeup? And and the people that have come to me, some of them I would never ever put a finger on to say, yeah, that'd be somebody who would ask me this question. Yeah. And it completely, that vulnerability of that, I'm creating a space by sharing that part of myself is received in an open way. And that creates a space for vulnerability. And then that takes down all the barriers. And so here's one of the things that I think has really been one of the most positive reinforcements to this whole journey is that every time I put on this other persona, this alter ego of Queen Jasmine, and I'll deviate from that for a second, and I'll give some root to the whole concept of an alter ego. Mm-hmm. My therapist asked me at one point, like, oh, does this other part of yourself have a name? And the answer at that time was no.
Yeah.
There is no other name for this is just me.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I didn't have another name or another persona or some other thing. And I thought that was weird. You know, I thought that whole idea of like somebody who has two different names or two different, genders or two different versions of themselves was like a personality disorder, or they're bipolar, or they're multiple personality, or they're just weird,
but not in an acceptable way. Yeah.
And I judged that concept a lot. And then I went for a psilocybin ceremony, and right at the end of the ceremony, like right when things were kind of coming back to baseline, and I was just reabsorbing the whole experience, a name appeared in my head. Just boom, feels like it kind of came towards me visually, like this name, and it was just there, poof, Jasmine appeared. I was like, well, that just got presented to me. It's like it just appeared as something like another car coming down the road appears on the horizon, here it comes kind of thing. And so once it arrived, I was like, oh, I didn't even pick this. Right. It was just presented to me. Like, you don't pick what kind of car comes down the road in the other direction towards you. It just comes to you. So there's that aspect of it that I wanted to share on. And then this whole concept of having an alter ego, a whole other part of another personality, another gender, that's taken some time to get used to, but it sure is fun. It's really fun, and it authorizes my life experience to now have this complete other outlet and form of self, this other personality. And I've seen this lots of times. Musicians do this, or writers do this. You write or you perform under another name, and that authorizes you a completely different set of personality with which to perform in. And that allows us to be lots of different versions of ourselves without having to let go of a part of ourselves that we are, or that we love. Like, I love Jay. Jay's a beautiful guy and works really hard to be a great person. And all this part of myself is something I'm really proud of and I want to hold on to and I love. I'm not going to just suddenly become something else and throw this part away. Yeah. I'm going to branch off a new part and be another part of myself. And back to where I started this, what happens when I put on this outfit, when I put on this character, or when I let Jasmine out? Everybody smiles. This is the experience that I have. Okay. I put on this outfit, I step out into the world, and everybody is disarmed of their judgment.
Yes.
It peels back. Suddenly there's this like smiles and enthusiasm and laughter and silliness and outrageousness becomes this like energetic field. And whether it's little kids or old folks, men or women, all different versions in between, most people just suddenly are having a good time. And there's this giant neon sign over my head that everybody like puts energy into, which says fun. And that it's blazingly obvious. Like, I have done this performances a number of times now, and I like walking down the street and there's just this bubble of fun radiating everywhere, and everybody wants to be part of it. And it's hilarious. Like, I can't overlook it, because the space that's created, the way that people interact with Jasmine is, she creates this bubble of just fantastic energy that everybody wants to be part of. Yeah. And it's amazing. I'm so over the moon about how fun that whole experience is.
I feel like so much fun is found when we let go of what we're holding on to so tightly. In the realm of how Jasmine shows up in the world, it's a version of you, it's an expression that is atypical. So it's outside of, but it's also non-threatening. You know what I mean? So it's like this like, oh my God, this stuff can happen outside of what I think should be happening around me and my cultural precondition. You know what I mean? I love that. Just from gosh, think about this. I've talked about this this is not the same thing at all, but I imagine there's part of this is happening when Jasmine walks down the street and shocks people into this delight of, oh my God, the world isn't exactly what I thought it was. It's not as boring, and I don't know everything, and I can still be surprised. And I've talked about this in my comedy classes, like a key skill toward growth is it's like a pie in the face. Why is a pie in the face fucking funny? It's like classic. It's old. Why is it funny? It's not that funny, but it's shocking. It's unexpected. It's not supposed to be happening. And yet here it is. It's happening. Here you are walking down the sidewalk. Wow. You know, there's so much power in that type of willingness to live and express in the parts that people do not typically express in. So I'm overjoyed. I love everything that we talked about. I want to just keep talking. So anyway, say more. Round us out, my friend.
I want to say thank you first because this, to our audience, is a emotionally safe space.
Yeah.
You know, our audience may fire back some any kind of response. There might be some overwhelming enthusiastic comments, and there might be some hate mail. There probably will be both, right? And because this space with Melanie and I, it's just Mel and I here, right? And our audience, you guys are listening, you're getting like a secondhand version because they're not part of the conversation while it's occurring. So I'm not dealing with somebody else's emotional interjection into this space. I know that Melanie's going to receive me in a positive, enthusiastic way, non-judgmental, objective position. So I want to make sure that continues to be reinforced, to share, because I do feel like the time and the place and how, I've been very, I almost want to say systematic, but very thoughtful and very considerate about how I choose to put Jasmine into the world. And that's been one of the big barriers for me. It's been like trying to figure out how to let her out of the box into the space called the world in a way where that's going to be approved of, appreciated, accepted, loved, enthusiastic support. And so I want to send some gratitude out to all my friends who have been with me on the journey, because everybody who came up to me from the very first moment of, strutting down the street and being like, God damn, you look amazing. Every single one of those comments is supportive, and they're new bricks in the new foundation and the structure that is myself, not the wall that's around myself. Yeah. So if you are in the world and you encounter others who are being authentic versions of themselves, support them.
Yeah.
Approve of their authenticity.
Yes.
Every little comment you make to support in anybody's smallest little version of attempting to show their authentic self, and you help them along that journey by giving them a true, authentic, supportive hell yeah, is going to help us to build those versions of ourselves that are the true us.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you have anything else you'd like to share that I didn't ask about that you want to make sure you share in this conversation?
It's such a huge part of my own life journey, and I'm sure that we'll spend more time talking about this in the future. I don't know that we need to try to cover all the bases in the first go.
Cool.
I think we did a pretty good job of tapping into kind of where this comes from and how we've gotten here. There's a lot more, and there's plenty more to come.
Yeah.
Jasmine is just getting started with stage presence and musical creativity and all the pieces that come along with it. So
I love it.
It's great.
Well, is there any place where people can find and follow her?
Yeah, actually, two things. I definitely want to say thank you to my closest people. Once again, to Julie, to Tucci, to Jamie, Brett, Brad, all been such huge parts. And to Dr. Stark, thank you so much. She's been so important. She's fantastic. And yes, you can follow Queen Jasmine on Instagram, Queen Jasmine Official with underscores. And you can follow on SoundCloud, same title, Queen Jasmine Official. And she is performing regularly these days out here in the Moab, Utah area. So if you follow on my Instagram, you can keep track of what's going on there. You can also follow Desert Soul Collective, where she's performing a lot. And I'm super excited about upcoming performances. There's one next week that's going to be off the hook. Can't wait.
I love it. I love you. God damn. Amazing. And I love you so much. And I'm so into this. I'm so proud of you for sharing and so grateful for you sharing. And everybody listening, thank you, as always, for being here for real. We really appreciate your support. Jay mentioned it earlier. If you are inspired to donate on Patreon, those donations really help us keep the show going. We make nothing doing this. So it's really helpful, and we're so grateful for those of you that do support us in that way. To follow us, trustthejourney.today, and anything else, Jay?
Yeah, I mean, please comment on Instagram, on Facebook, reach out and make touch with us on YouTube, anywhere that you feel so inspired to make contact. It really is much appreciated, and we loved hearing from you. It really does. Every single message gets read, and every message gets shared between us, and we love it so much. Thanks, Kim. We really appreciate you. You do a great job.
Yeah.
We couldn't be doing this without you. So thanks, Kimberly Joy Voice. If you need podcast editing services, it's KimberlyJoyVoice@gmail.com.
And we love you all so much. On that note, peace out.
Love you.